Nobody is coming to save you. Let that land for a moment. Sit with the weight of it. Because somewhere deep inside you, there is still a part of you waiting. Waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity, the right person to recognize your potential and hand you the life you believe you deserve. And that part of you, that quiet, patient, waiting part, is the most dangerous enemy you will ever face. Not the economy, not your upbringing, not the people who doubted you, overlooked you, or dismissed you before you even opened your mouth. The most dangerous force in your life is the story you tell yourself at 11 p.m. when you should be working. The story that says, tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll start, tomorrow I'll be ready, tomorrow the conditions will be right. That story is a lie. And on some level, you already know it. This video is not going to be comfortable. It is not going to validate your excuses or reassure you that everything is fine. What it is going to do is strip away the comfortable illusions you've been carrying, confront you with the raw mechanics of how extraordinary lives are actually built, and leave you with something far more valuable than motivation. It's going to leave you with understanding, because motivation fades. Understanding stays. And when you truly understand why the grind works, why discipline is non-negotiable, why suffering is not a detour but the actual road, you stop needing to feel inspired to move. You just move. We are going to walk through the complete architecture of radical self-discipline. Not the Instagram version, not the highlight reel. The actual, unglamorous, brutal, and ultimately liberating truth about what separates the people who get what they want from the people who spend their lives wondering why they never got it. This conversation will cover the illusion of tomorrow, the war between your two selves, the sacred nature of the grind, the psychology of winners versus losers, and the hidden truth that the process itself, not the outcome, is where the real reward lives. And then in the second half of this video, we go deeper. We go into territory that most people are not prepared for, not because it is complex, but because it demands something from you that comfort will never allow. So stay with me. Every minute you give, this will be returned to you multiplied. Let's begin. There is a particular kind of theft happening in your life right now. It is not violent. It leaves no evidence. Nobody will arrest the thief. No court will hear the case. And most people who are victimized by it never even realize the crime occurred. The thief is called tomorrow, and it has been stealing from you since the day you were old enough to understand the concept of later. Think about how you use the word. I'll start the diet tomorrow. I'll reach out to that contact tomorrow. I'll begin writing the book tomorrow. I'll have that difficult conversation tomorrow. Tomorrow is the most popular address in the world, and almost nothing important ever actually gets delivered there. It is a destination that keeps moving. It is a horizon you can see but never reach. Here is the philosophical trap at the center of this. The concept of tomorrow feels like a resource. It feels like stored potential, like a savings account where you deposit your ambitions, and they sit safely until you're ready to withdraw them. But time does not work like a savings account. There is no interest. There is no balance you can check. Every second that passes is permanently subtracted from the total amount you were ever going to have. You cannot get it back. You cannot borrow against it. You cannot renegotiate the terms. The ancient Stoics understood this in a way that modern culture has almost entirely forgotten. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men to ever live, a man who commanded armies and governed an empire, wrote repeatedly in his private journals about the urgency of the present moment. Not as motivation. He was writing to himself, not to be published. He wrote it because he genuinely, philosophically believed that the present moment is the only place where life actually happens. The past is inaccessible. The future is hypothetical. The present is the only real territory you ever have. When you choose tomorrow, you are not delaying action. You are choosing inaction and labeling it a plan. And the psychological mechanism that makes this possible, the mechanism that lets you feel responsible while being irresponsible, is one of the most sophisticated pieces of self-deception the human mind has ever produced. Psychologists call it temporal discounting. Your brain, when evaluating options, automatically assigns less weight to future rewards and future consequences than to present ones. A reward available now feels worth more than the same reward available in 6 months, even if the 6-month reward is objectively larger. This is why people choose the donut today over the health they want in 5 years. It is why someone will spend 4 hours watching television tonight while knowing it is costing them the business, the body, the skill, the relationship they say they want. You are not weak. You are not uniquely broken. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do in an environment it was not designed for, but understanding the mechanism does not excuse you from it. If anything, it makes the responsibility heavier, because now you cannot claim ignorance. You know the trap. The question is whether you are willing to step out of it. Procrastination is not a quirk of personality. It is not a minor inefficiency you can live with. It is, and I want you to hear this clearly, it is a progressive erosion of your potential. Every time you choose the comfortable delay over the uncomfortable action, you are not merely losing time. You are reinforcing a neural pathway that says, I am someone who avoids. You are building an identity around retreat. An identity once built becomes self-fulfilling. The person who habitually avoids becomes, in their own mind, an avoider. And avoiders avoid because that is who they believe they are. The reversal of this is not motivation. It is not willpower in the way most people imagine willpower, as some finite reservoir of strength that gets depleted by use. The reversal is action so immediate and so consistent that it begins to rewrite the identity. You don't become disciplined and then take action. You take action and, over time, become disciplined. The behavior precedes the identity, not the other way around. So the practical instruction here is almost offensively simple. Start now. Not with the whole project. Not with the perfect version. Start with the first available action. The email you have been drafting in your head for 3 weeks, the first sentence of the thing you want to write, the first rep of the workout you have been postponing, the first call you need to make. The brain, once it encounters momentum, adapts to it. Motion produces more motion. Stillness produces more stillness. Choose which physics you want governing your life. Now let us talk about the war, because here's what nobody tells you about self-improvement, about ambition, about the pursuit of anything meaningful. It is not a war against the world. It is a war against yourself. Or more precisely, it is a war between two versions of yourself who are constantly competing for control of your actions, your time, your narrative, and ultimately your life. The first version, let's call him the comfortable self, is not evil. He is not lazy in a moral sense. He is simply optimized for survival. He wants rest when he is tired. He wants pleasure when he is bored. He avoids pain, conflict, and the terrifying exposure that comes with genuinely trying at something important. He is the voice that says, you've done enough today, when you have not. He is the voice that says, you don't have what it takes, when you haven't yet tried. He is the voice that, if obeyed consistently, will deliver you directly to a life of quiet mediocrity. A life that is not tragic, not dramatic, not a failure in any obvious sense, but a life in which you never actually found out who you were capable of becoming. The second version, the implacable self, the relentless self, is the one you catch glimpses of. The version who showed up when it genuinely mattered. The version who surprised you. The version who at some point in your past did something you weren't sure you could do, and afterward felt something you could not quite name. A particular kind of pride that is different from the pride of being given something. The pride of having earned something. That version of you exists. He is not a fantasy. He is not waiting for better circumstances. He is waiting for you to stop choosing the other guy. This is the deepest structure of the human condition that almost no motivational content adequately addresses, because it does not have a comfortable resolution. The comfortable self never disappears. The war never ends. Even the most disciplined human beings on Earth, elite athletes, world-class artists, the entrepreneurs who built the companies you use every day, they all describe the same internal experience. The voice that says stop, the pull toward ease, the temptation to coast. What separates them is not the absence of that voice. It is the decision, made repeatedly and deliberately, to act in spite of it. Discipline is not a personality trait you either have or do not have. It is a daily practice of choosing the harder option when the easier option is available. That is the entire definition. Everything else, the morning routines, the journals, the cold showers, the goal-setting frameworks, all of those are simply structures that make it more likely you'll choose correctly in the moments when it counts. But the choice itself is always yours, always available and always consequential. There is a concept I want you to internalize called the appearance rule, and it is simpler than anything else I will say in this video. The most important thing is to show up, not to show up perfectly, not to show up at peak performance, not to show up when you feel like it, to show up when you don't feel like it. Success, when fitness, in business, in creative work, in relationships, is disproportionately built on the days when everything in you said not today and you went anyway. Those days are worth 10 times the days when you were excited and energized and everything flowed. Because on those good days, you're performing. On the hard days, you're building. The neurological basis for this is well established. Consistency of behavior, regardless of the emotional state accompanying it, is the primary mechanism through which new neural pathways become dominant. When you go to the gym on the morning you least want to go, you are not just training your body. You are training your brain's response to resistance. You are teaching your nervous system that resistance is not a stop sign. It is a green light. The test at the end of every day is not whether you succeeded in every goal. It is whether you can stand in front of your own reflection, look yourself in the eye, and say with honesty, "I did not quit when quitting was available. I showed up." That is the only performance review that ultimately matters. Every external measure, the money, the recognition, the metrics, those are downstream of that moment. The man who can pass that daily test consistently over years will build something. It is not a promise, it is a law. Let us go further. The word grind has been diluted by culture into something almost meaningless. It has been turned into content, into aesthetic, into a brand. People post about the grind. They wear it as an identity accessory. They use it to signal ambition without actually being ambitious. I want to talk about the real thing, not the performance of hard work, but the actual experience of it, which is considerably less photogenic and considerably more transformative. The real grind is lonely. This is perhaps the most honest thing I can tell you about it, and it is the thing that most people are not prepared for. When you make the decision to pursue something at the highest level, when you genuinely commit to becoming extraordinary at what you do, you will lose things. Not immediately, not dramatically. But gradually, the people who were content with their Saturday nights will find you less available. The conversations that used to feel normal will start to feel shallow. The entertainment that used to fill your evenings will start to feel like theft. This is not a tragedy, but it is a real cost, and pretending otherwise is dishonest. The people who have built exceptional things, and to the athletes who competed at the highest level, the founders who created something from nothing, the artists whose work outlives them, they all describe a version of this same experience. A narrowing of social world, a deepening of internal world, a growing preference for creation over consumption. This does not mean you stop caring about people. It means your relationship with your own time becomes sacred in a way it was not before. The sacrifice is not punitive. It is directional. You are not giving things up because ambition requires suffering as payment. You are releasing certain things because your attention, like your time, is finite, and what you attend to determines what you build. An hour spent in low-value entertainment is an hour not spent developing the skill, the knowledge, the project, the relationship that compounds toward the life you actually want. Every choice of what to do is also a choice of what not to do. The grind is, at its core, a sustained series of choices in favor of your future self at the expense of your present comfort. Now here's the part that culture consistently misrepresents. The purpose of difficulty is not to prove your toughness. The purpose of difficulty is transformation. There is a metallurgical metaphor that has survived for centuries precisely because it is accurate. Steel becomes steel through fire. The process of heating, stressing, and cooling metal is not incidental to its strength. It is the source of its strength. Remove the process, and you don't have softer steel. You have something that is not steel at all. Human character works identically. The challenges you face, the failures, the rejections, the stretches of effort that seem to produce nothing, the moments when you genuinely do not know if you have what it takes, these are not obstacles placed between you and your destination. They are the mechanism by which you become the person capable of reaching it. A person who has never been tested has no idea who they are under pressure. A person who has been tested repeatedly and has chosen, each time, not to collapse. That person knows something about themselves that cannot be taught any other way. That knowledge is a form of wealth that cannot be taken. And within the grind, the single most undervalued concept is this: consistency defeats intensity every time. The person who trains for 2 hours every single day for a year will build something that the person who trains for 12 hours once a month will never touch. The person who writes 500 words every day will finish books that the person waiting for the 10,000-word inspiration day will never start. The person who makes one sales call every morning before doing anything else will build a pipeline that the person waiting for the perfect pitch and the perfect timing will watch their competition build instead. Consistency works because of compounding, not the metaphorical kind, the actual mathematical kind. Small, repeated inputs grow exponentially over time. The first months of consistent effort often produce results so modest that quitting feels rational. This is exactly when most people quit. They compare their current output to their desired destination, find the gap enormous, and conclude that the effort is not working. What they do not see, because compounding is invisible until it is suddenly, dramatically visible, is that they are 2/3 of the way through the hardest part, and the acceleration is coming. The people who do not quit in that invisible period are the people who, a year later, have the results that everyone else calls overnight success. Let me pause here and ask you something directly. You are watching this video. You made it this far, which already tells me something about you. Because most people didn't. Most people clicked away in the first 2 minutes looking for something easier. You stayed. And I think you stayed because something in this conversation is landing, is hitting something real in you, something that recognizes the truth of what is being said, even if part of you is resisting it. So here's what I want you to do right now. Go to the comments and write this. I build in silence. I let the results make the noise. Write it. Not because the words are magic, not because commenting does anything on its own. Write it because every act of public commitment changes the internal architecture of who you believe yourself to be. Psychological research on identity and behavior change consistently shows that when we make public declarations, even small ones, even in a YouTube comment section, we activate a different set of cognitive and behavioral defaults. We become slightly more likely to act in alignment with the declaration than we would have been without making it. Slightly, but slightly repeated over time is everything. While you're there, if this video is giving you something real, hit the like. Subscribe to the channel, not as a transaction, not because I'm asking you for a favor, but because the act of saying yes, this is the kind of content I want more of, is itself a form of self-governance. You are curating your own mental diet. You are voting, with your attention, for the version of yourself that wants to be sharpened rather than sedated. That is not nothing. That is a small but genuine act of discipline. Now, let me tell you about winners and losers. And before you react to those words, before you dismiss them as simplistic or harsh, understand that I am not talking about wealth, status, fame, or any external metric. I am talking about a mentality. A set of cognitive habits that either compound toward freedom or compound toward limitation. Because the same 24 hours exist for everyone. And what people do with them diverges in ways that are almost entirely driven by these mental habits, not by circumstances. The defining characteristic of the winner mentality, and I will use these terms as shorthand, not as judgments, is total ownership. Total ownership means that regardless of what happened, regardless of who was at fault, regardless of the fairness or unfairness of the situation, you operate from the position that your response is your responsibility. This is not a naive denial of injustice. The world is genuinely unfair in countless ways. Systemic barriers are real, luck is real, circumstances of birth are real, and they matter. But here's the truth that sits underneath all of that, and it is uncomfortable precisely because it cannot be disputed. Victimhood and agency cannot coexist in the same moment. If you are occupying the position of victim, even if that position is entirely justified, you are simultaneously relinquishing the position of agent. And it is only from the agent position that change is possible. You can be right about who is responsible for how you got here and still be the only one with the power to determine where you go next. Choosing to be right about the blame is choosing to give up the power to move. This is what winners understand. They do not waste energy on the fairness audit. They acknowledge the reality of their situation clearly, honestly, without minimizing. And then they immediately pivot to the only question that matters. Given where I am, what is the most effective thing I can do right now? That pivot is everything. That pivot is the entire difference between the mentality that builds lives and the mentality that explains why lives could not be built. The loser mentality, and again, this is not a permanent label. It is a description of a cognitive pattern that any person can change at any time. The loser mentality is characterized by a constant search for explanation. Why did this happen? Why does this always happen to me? Why did they get the opportunity and not me? These questions feel like thinking, but they are not. They are the intellectual equivalent of spinning wheels in mud, a great deal of energy expended with no forward movement. There is a powerful distinction between explanation and analysis. Explanation is backward-looking and passive. It assigns cause and stops there. Analysis is forward-looking and actionable. It identifies cause in order to alter future outcomes. The winner's relationship with failure is analytical. The loser's relationship with failure is explanatory. And this is why failure for these two mentalities produces completely different results. For the winner, failure is information. It is the most specific and honest feedback available. It tells you exactly what did not work, which means it points directly toward what might. For the loser, failure is evidence. Evidence that the world is unfair, that they lack what it takes, that the deck was stacked. Both experiences begin with the same event. The divergence is entirely in the interpretation. The practical implication of this is radical. When you fail, and you will fail repeatedly at anything worth attempting, the single most important question is not why did this happen, but what does this tell me about what to do next? Ask that question first. You can do the autopsy later, move first, understand later, because the window of momentum that exists immediately after a setback is precious, and if you fill it with self-pity and explanation, you close it. Everyone has the same 24 hours. I know this sounds like a cliche, and cliches become cliches precisely because they are repeated so often that people stop actually hearing them. So hear this, really hear it. The time exists. Whatever you say you do not have time for, the workout, the side project, the skill you want to develop, the relationship you want to build. The time exists. You are not actually short on time. You are short on priority. The person who says they do not have time to exercise watches on average more than 3 hours of television per day. The person who says they do not have time to build their business scrolls through social media for 90 minutes every morning before getting out of bed. The time is there. The question is always and only, what are you choosing to do with it? And this is not a moral judgment. You are allowed to watch television. You are allowed to scroll. But you are not allowed to simultaneously claim that you want things you are not moving toward and feel genuinely confused about why those things have not arrived. The math is honest, even when we are not. Your life will be, over time, an almost perfect reflection of where you actually invested your attention. Not where you intended to invest it, not where you wish you had invested it, but where you actually did. That is an uncomfortable mirror, but it is the most accurate one available. Now I want to talk about failure as fuel, because this is where the philosophy becomes genuinely powerful, and where most motivational content fails you. It talks about using failure without actually explaining the mechanism. Failure is not inherently instructive. You do not automatically learn from failure. You learn from failure plus reflection plus recommitment. Without those three components, failure is just pain with no return. People fail repeatedly at the same things not because they are fundamentally limited, but because they experience the pain of the failure and then either avoid the domain entirely or return to it with no change in approach. The fire burned them last time, so they either run from the fire or walk back into it the same way, expecting a different result. What turns failure into fuel is the combination of three things. First, honest accounting, looking clearly at what actually happened without minimizing your role in it or inflating the role of external factors. Second, extraction of the lesson, identifying the specific thing that did not work and why, with enough precision that the lesson is actionable. Third, recommitment with adjustment, returning to the domain not with the same approach, but with the modified approach that the lesson suggests. When these three things happen, failure is not just survivable, it is genuinely valuable. It is more valuable than easy success, because easy success teaches you nothing about what works. It only confirms that the conditions were right, which may never repeat. Difficult failure processed correctly teaches you something permanent. The character dimension of this is equally important. There is a quality that is developed specifically and exclusively through the experience of being knocked down and choosing to stand back up. There is no other way to develop it. You cannot read your way to it. You cannot plan your way to it. You cannot skip the being knocked down part and get to the standing back up part. Every person you admire who demonstrates genuine resilience, the kind that is not performance but actual structural durability, got there the same way. Through the fire. Through the specific experience of losing something that mattered and deciding that the loss would not be the last word. This is why the grind is not just instrumentally valuable, it is constitutively valuable. It is not just that hard work produces results. It is that the person who has done hard work is different in their character and their self-knowledge from the person who has not. The results are the visible output. The character is the actual product. And character. The capacity to persist through difficulty, to act with integrity under pressure, to maintain standards when no one is watching, that is the foundation on which everything else is built. Results can be reversed by circumstances. Character cannot. Now we arrive at the part of this conversation where I need you to make a choice. Everything I have said so far has been foundational. Important, necessary, true, but foundational. What comes next is more surgical, more advanced. The concepts in the second half of this video are less about the mechanics of working hard and more about the architecture of becoming. They are about how you construct, from the inside out, the kind of person whose hard work inevitably translates into something extraordinary, and they require a level of honest self-examination that not everyone is prepared to do. The reason these ideas are reserved for the second half, the reason they come after the grind and the discipline and the failure and the mentality, is that they are useless and potentially dangerous without the foundation. A person with no discipline who understands the advanced principles of value creation will use that understanding to justify why they are not yet applying them. They will turn insight into another form of procrastination. The person who has the foundation, who has already made the decision to show up and stay in the fight, for that person, what comes next is acceleration. It is the force multiplier on top of an already moving machine. So consider this your threshold. We have covered the illusion of tomorrow. We have covered the war between your two selves. We have covered the real nature of the grind and the sacred value of consistency. We have covered the total ownership mentality and the alchemy of failure. These are the pillars. Now we build the architecture that sits on top of them. The first principle of the second layer is this: the process is the destination. Western culture has an almost pathological relationship with outcomes. We fixate on the endpoint, the revenue number, the body composition, the published book, the relationship, the recognition, as if the endpoint is where the meaning lives. And when we get there, if we get there, we experience a remarkable thing: a brief period of satisfaction followed by a return to something very close to baseline. The achievement, once achieved, loses most of its psychological potency almost immediately. And we find ourselves reaching for the next thing, carrying the same internal hunger to the next destination, expecting this time the arrival will finally deliver what we were looking for. This is not a design flaw. It is a design feature, like one that evolution built into us to keep us moving, keep us seeking, keep us ambitious. But if you do not understand it, it will keep you permanently dissatisfied, even when you are winning by every objective measure. The person who is only in it for the outcome will be unhappy on the way there, and briefly satisfied on the way in, and then right back to unhappy as the next destination appears on the horizon. The person who understands that the process is the point, that the daily practice of becoming is the actual reward, not the confirmation of having arrived, that person has access to a sustainable source of fulfillment that the outcome-addicted person will never have. Not because they don't care about results, they do, but because their satisfaction is not held hostage to results. It is available right now in the work itself, in the act of showing up and operating at the edge of their capability. There is a practical dimension to this that is not just philosophical. The people who fall in love with the process outperform the people who are only motivated by the outcome consistently and dramatically over time. Because the people motivated by outcomes slow down and coast when they get close. They protect the lead. They get cautious. The people who love the process accelerate when they get close because getting close means more of what they enjoy. This is not a personality difference. It is a strategic orientation, and it can be chosen. Here is the instruction. Find something to love about the daily practice of what you are building. Not the idea of being good at it, but the actual daily mechanics of getting better at it. The discomfort of growth, the precision of focus, the moment when something difficult becomes slightly less difficult. Fall in love with the repetition. The people who find the monastery in the mundane, who find the sacred in the routine, are the people who do it long enough for compounding to become visible. The second advanced principle is strategic patience, and it is not what most people think patience means. Most people use patience as a passive concept. Patience as waiting. Patience as tolerating the slow passage of time with equanimity. That is not the patience that builds things. Strategic patience is the active, deliberate decision to remain committed to a long-term process while being continuously present and engaged in the short-term execution. It is the combination of long-term perspective and short-term precision. It is knowing where you are going and being fully invested in where you are right now. The agricultural metaphor is almost too perfect. When you plant a seed, the absence of visible growth in the early weeks is not evidence that nothing is happening. The root system is developing underground. The infrastructure that will eventually support visible and rapid growth is being built in conditions where you cannot see it. The farmer who digs up the seed every 3 days to check on its progress, out of impatience or anxiety or doubt, destroys the process he claims to be invested in. The farmer who trusts the process, who continues to water and nourish the ground based on the principle rather than the visible evidence, gets the harvest. Most businesses fail in the first 2 years. Most creative projects are abandoned before the skill catches up to the vision. Most physical transformations are reversed within a year. In almost every case, the failure is not strategic. It is temporal. People quit during the root development phase before the above-ground growth begins. They assess the outcome before the process has had adequate time to produce one and conclude that the process does not work. Strategic patience means you set a longer time horizon than feels comfortable, and you make a commitment not to evaluate the investment against the outcome during that period. You evaluate against the process. Are you doing the work? Are you showing up? Are you learning from the feedback and adjusting? If yes, then the outcome is not your concern for now. The outcome is a function of the process. Trust the function. This does not mean passive resignation. Within the long time horizon, you should be obsessively attentive to the quality of your daily execution. You should be constantly learning, adjusting, optimizing. The patience is at the macro level. The urgency is at the micro level. That combination, macro patience, micro urgency, is one of the most powerful strategic postures available. The third advanced principle, small victories are not consolation prizes. There is a cultural tendency, particularly in the high ambition circles where people take success seriously, to dismiss incremental progress as insufficient, to only count the major milestones, to treat everything that is not the destination as merely the road. This tendency is understandable and it is wrong, and it costs people the very thing they are trying to build. Small victories are not evidence that you are making progress towards something large. They are evidence that you are becoming something different. The difference matters. Becoming is not the same as progressing. Progress is movement toward a fixed point. Becoming is transformation, the continuous and cumulative change in who you are, what you are capable of, and what your defaults are under pressure. When you celebrate a small victory, you are not patting yourself on the back for your proximity to the goal. You are acknowledging a genuine change in your identity. The neurological mechanism behind this is momentum. Momentum, in behavioral terms, is the tendency for consistent small positive actions to make subsequent small positive actions easier and more likely. It is not mystical, it is mechanical. Every morning you execute your routine, you are lowering the resistance to the next day's execution. Every small commitment you keep builds the neural infrastructure that makes keeping larger commitments more possible. Every tiny victory deposits trust into your internal bank account. The place where you store the belief that when you say you will do something, you will do it. That bank account, built over years of small deposits, is what real self-confidence actually is. Not the performance of confidence, not the affirmation of confidence. The actual earned, verified belief in your own reliability under pressure. So celebrate the small victories, not excessively, not in a way that replaces the drive for larger things, but genuinely, internally acknowledge, I said I would do this, and I did it. That is a real thing. It is a building block. It compounds. Now I want to speak directly to the nature of the world you are operating in, because understanding this context is essential for understanding why all of this matters beyond the personal. Nobody cares. This is not cynicism. This is not a statement about human cruelty or indifference as character flaws. It is a simple description of the structure of human attention and the economics of value creation. The world does not owe you recognition for your potential. The world does not reward intentions. The world does not compensate effort that is invisible or results that are below the threshold of what it needs. The world is an extraordinarily efficient machine for allocating attention and resources toward demonstrated, visible, differentiated value, and an extraordinarily indifferent machine toward everything that is not quite there yet. The people who resent this, who feel that their effort should be recognized regardless of its output, that their trying should count, are not wrong in some moral dimension. In a perfect world, perhaps all effort would be equally seen and equally valued. But in this world, the only world that exists, the gap between trying and succeeding is filled by the work, and only the work, until the results are undeniable. They don't care that you were tired. They don't care that your circumstances were difficult. They don't care that you tried harder than someone who got further. They don't care that it was unfair. And the moment you fully accept this, not with bitterness but with clarity, you stop waiting for the caring to arrive before you move. You stop performing effort for an imaginary audience. You start building something real for real reasons on real foundations. And paradoxically, that is exactly when the world starts to care. Not because you earned its care by suffering, but because the results you produce by operating without needing its care are finally too visible to ignore. This is the hardest truth in this entire video, and I am going to say it without softening it. The world responds to output. It responds to results. It responds to demonstrated value in forms it can recognize and use. All of the internal work, the discipline, the character development, the identity transformation, the consistency, all of that is necessary and real and valuable. But it becomes undeniable only when it produces something external. The internal work is the root system. The external result is the tree. Both are real. The world sees the tree first, so work in silence. Build in private. Invest in the root system before you need the fruit. But do not confuse the root work for the completion of the work. The root work is the foundation. The tree is the declaration. Grow both. There is one more thing I want to leave you with, and it is perhaps the most personal thing I will say in this entire video. The person you are capable of becoming, the version of you that is disciplined, relentless, clear-eyed about the world and about yourself, operating at the true edge of your capacity, building something that will outlast your current circumstances, that person is not hypothetical. He is not waiting for some transformation to happen to you from the outside. He is not the product of better conditions or a better time or a better version of the world. He exists right now, inside the life you are currently living, inside the choices you are currently making, available to you in every moment where you choose the harder thing over the easier thing. The gap between who you are and who you are capable of being is not talent. It is not luck. It is not connections or money or access or time. It is a series of daily decisions made in private where no one is watching, where no one will ever know except you. Decisions to show up or not, to do the work or not, to stay in the fight or not, to own the outcome or not. Those decisions accumulated over weeks and months and years are the only biography that actually matters. Not the story you tell about yourself, not the story others tell about you. The story written in action every single day, in the gap between what was comfortable and what you chose instead. You already know what you need to do. You have always known. The information was never the problem. The resolve is the problem. And resolve is not a gift. It is not a trait. It is a decision. Made now, remade tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Every single day for the rest of your life. Start now, not tomorrow. Right now. Go to the comments. Write, I build in silence. I let the results make the noise. Write it, mean it, and let that declaration be the first brick in the wall you are building starting today. If this video gave you something real, hit the like. Subscribe. Not because I need your validation, but because the act of consciously choosing the kind of content that sharpens you rather than sedates you is an act of self-respect. It is a vote for the version of you that wants to be forged, not entertained. The work continues. It always does. Go.